Today, I will talk about direct drivers of biodiversity loss. Life on Earth is astounding in its diversity and its ability to transform the world. Till date, 1.8 million species have been identified. Although the total number of species present on the Earth is unknown, but probably it's between 5 to 50 million. It is the combination of these species and interaction with themselves and with the environment that make this Earth a habitable place. Having said this, the maintenance of healthy environment require all its components to be in a good position. The component of ecosystem are population, biological communities, genetic variation, and variety and variability of living organism. We share this planet with millions of other species, and we are dependent on these species for our food, fuel, fiber, and other requirement. The well-being of human is directly linked with the well-being of species which we share in this planet. Biodiversity is crucial for providing us various ecosystem services. Regulation of chemical composition of atmosphere, regulation of climate, nutrient cycling, biological control of flora and fauna, cultural values, and others. These are tremendous resources or tremendous services which is provided by biodiversity to us. Despite this, there is an unprecedented loss of biodiversity due to human activities and development, which is leading to the fragmentation and loss of biodiversity, loss of gene, loss of species, flora and fauna. It is a well-established fact, if this loss of biodiversity is continued, it will be catastrophic for the future generation. Having said this, I will come to drivers of biodiversity change. What is a driver? Driver is any natural or human-induced factor which directly or indirectly causes change. The driver of biodiversity change is any indirect or direct cause of change in ecosystem or biodiversity. There are two drivers of biodiversity change: direct drivers of biodiversity change and indirect drivers of biodiversity change. Direct drivers of biodiversity change refers to the drivers that unequivocally influence ecosystem processes. These direct drivers can be measured and easily quantified. The indirect drivers of biodiversity change refers to the driver which operates by altering the level or the rate of change of one or more direct driver. If we talk about the change of ecosystem or change of diversity, almost all the change is due to the multiple interacting drivers. For example, population together with economic development will lead to the climate change. There are reports which shows that deforestation or desertification is result of synergistic combination of various drivers. These drivers interact with each other and give, along with that interaction, they give the feedback and affect the biodiversity. Coming to the direct driver of biodiversity change, the main direct drivers of biodiversity change are habitat and land use change, which include habitat fragmentation, habitat degradation, habitat destroy, or other land use changes. Second is overexploitation or unsustainable use of natural resources. The third one is invasive alien species. The fourth is pollution and nutrient load, specifically phosphorus and nitrogen load. And last but not least is climate change. Habitat and land use change historically is the major direct driver of biodiversity loss across all biomes. Climate change is now predicted to have a continuously increasing impact in all biomes and individual species, communities, population, and along with this ecosystem structure and function. Pollution, especially nitrogen and phosphorus load, together with other contaminant, is causing a increase in biodiversity loss, and it's an important driver for biodiversity change. Overexploitation of natural resources as well as invasive alien species both are causing harm to biodiversity, leading to loss of biodiversity. We will deal with this direct driver of biodiversity change one by one in preceding session. Now, coming to the indirect drivers of biodiversity change, the main indirect drivers of biodiversity change are demographic change, economic activity, levels of international trade, per capita consumption patterns, cultural and religious factor, scientific and technological change. If we say indirect driver, what is an indirect driver of biodiversity change? Indirect driver of biodiversity change influence the resource quantity of human society. For example, increase in population together with per capita consumption pattern will lead to the more demand of food or energy, which in turn will lead to the overexploitation of natural resources. If we see the impact of indirect drivers on biodiversity change, we can say the impact is both positive as well as negative. If we talk about the positive impact of indirect drivers into the biodiversity, the example is cultural and religious factors. How this cultural and religious factor is positively impacting the biodiversity. The reason being that these cultural and religious value give a space for biodiversity conservation through a change in the mindset. For example, in Indian culture, banyan tree is worshipped. So, in this way, the banyan tree is being preserved. Likewise, if we talk about Ganga river, the Ganga river is being worshipped. So, there are different sacred groves, there are different areas where the biodiversity is being protected just because of cultural and religious factor. In this way, this indirect driver of biodiversity change will have a positive impact on biodiversity. The same way, the loss of traditional knowledge is detrimental for the loss of biodiversity. Why? Because in many communities, the traditional knowledge is the center for belief for the conservation of biological diversity. Same way, loss of cultural values, for example, indigenous language, loss of indigenous language will lead to loss of biodiversity, is a major driver of biodiversity loss because of loss of the sustainable management practices of biodiversity loss. So, direct driver together with indirect driver, by having a network of interactivity, is finally leads to the biodiversity change in different places, in different regions according to their type of interaction and their intensity of interaction. Now, coming to the direct driver of biodiversity change, the first we will discuss about habitat and land use change. The habitat and land use change includes agriculture expansion, urban sprawl, infrastructure development and deforestation. In terrestrial ecosystem, the land use change is the major driver for biodiversity change. The areas which are not suitable for crop, those are only intact. Otherwise, most of the natural or wild land has been converted into agricultural land for fulfilling the ever increasing demand of food, fuel, fiber or energy and other things of the population. Like desert, tundra is a bit intact, otherwise all other biomes have been severely affected because of agriculture expansion. Urban sprawl is the second major driver of habitat loss and land use. We know that half of the population is living in urban area. This urbanization is leading to the consumption of natural resources, consumption of energy and other resources, which is leading to the loss of biodiversity or loss of species, extinction of species, threatening of species because of urbanization or agriculture expansion together with other factors is resulting into the loss of many species and disappearance of many species into the earth, which is again very detrimental or catastrophic for the survival of human beings. The next driver of habitat and land use change is infrastructural development. Infrastructural development which leads to the construction of different housing boards or housing, industrial developments, mines, transport work, the construction of dams, reservoir, oil pipes, natural gas pipes and many other development activities leading to the loss of biodiversity into this earth. If we see the effect of infrastructural development is directly affecting on wildlife. Loss of wildlife is one important concern because of this infrastructure development, which is affected by disturbance and avoidance. Again, the habitat fragmentation is affected or is caused by infrastructural development, which is due to barrier effect. The infrastructure development are also leading to increased hunting activity and small scale settlements along the road, which is leading to the further loss of biodiversity. The next important cause of land use change or habitat loss or habitat degradation is deforestation. Despite of different policies, annually 13 million hectare forest is being degraded. The degradation of this forest is basically because of conversion for agriculture uses, for infrastructure development, for wood extraction, for agriculture product prices, institutional and place specific factors. Deforestation is a major concern. The half of the biological diversity is in tropical forest. The loss of these species, the loss of these population, the loss of this community will lead to the loss of entire biodiversity present in that tropical forest, and half of the population or majority of the population is dependent on tropical forest for their biological resources, for livelihood, for many other activities. Beside the loss of biodiversity, the deforestation is also leading to the loss of natural habitat. For one example, I will like to quote that during the agriculture expansion is not only for food, it is also for biofuel production. In tropical forest, the removal of forest for oil palm plantation has resulted in 73 to 83% loss of biodiversity, that is bird and butterfly biodiversity. So, deforestation is not only the loss of biodiversity, it is also leading the loss of natural habitat for many other forms of life. Along with this, deforestation is also leading to the loss of water regulation. it's causing the global warming as well as global cooling and loss of livelihood for many poor people. The deforestation is also causing the impact on other drivers of biodiversity loss. For example, climate change. We all know that the greenhouse gas emission from tropical forest is a major source of greenhouse gas or climate change for the change of climate. The international effect for mitigation of climate change also deals with the or also address with the reduction of these greenhouse gases from tropical forest. So deforestation is also leading to the climate change by affecting or by releasing the various greenhouse gases. The next driver of biodiversity loss is pollution. We all know pollution is undesirable change in environment. The pollution which affect the biodiversity can be categorized as air pollution, water pollution, marine pollution from oil spills. Air pollution. Air pollution affect the biodiversity. The atmosphere, the hydrosphere, the lithosphere, all are affected by air pollution. Air pollution affects more to small organism than higher organism. It affects more to plants than animal. There are different sources of air pollution. There are stationary sources and non-point pollution sources. The various sources of air pollution are fossil fuel burning, burning of wood, coal from electrical power plant, likewise industrial pollution which is causing SO2, vehicular pollution which is producing carbon monoxide. So all these pollution, all these air pollutant are causing adverse effect to the biodiversity. Second pollution which affect the biodiversity is water pollution. After the industrial revolution, various substances are being discharged into the water, various toxic chemicals, metals, heavy metals, which are deteriorating not only the health of the water ecosystem, but also the various species, food web, food chain which is present into the water ecosystem. Whereas inland and wetland ecosystem are severely affected by the discharge of this chemical into the water body by various industries. For example, the microorganism is being discharged into the waste without any treatment. Likewise, nuclear waste, waste from different industries which have various carcinogens, which have various toxic chemicals, polyaromatic hydrocarbons and other compounds which is destroying the biodiversity of water. The marine pollution from oil spills is also a major driver of biodiversity loss. We all know that ocean is a biodiverse rich center. The pollution, the oil pollution specifically, is not only affecting the benthic population, the fish population, it is also affecting the breeding and feeding of birds or entire food web or entire ecosystem. So, air pollution, water pollution, marine pollution from oil spill, these are main pollution which are causing the biodiversity loss. There is one more pollution load which is coming from agricultural runoff. Agricultural fertilization is also causing the nutrient flow into the water river. This impacts of excessive nitrogen flow is leading to eutrophication of freshwater ecosystem. What is eutrophication? Eutrophication is conversion of freshwater lake into a polluted lake. The eutrophication leads to the algal blooms. It leads to the asphyxious condition which due to consumption of oxygen by algae, it leads to the degradation of other organisms which are present into the water. So, eutrophication of freshwater lake because of nitrogen and phosphorus is one of the very detrimental effect which is causing on water biodiversity. Then hypoxia in coastal marine system, coral reef which is a biodiverse rich system, is being degraded because of this excessive nitrogen and phosphorus flow. Nitrogen oxide emission, it also contributes to global climate change, and NOx, different oxide of nitrogen, also cause air pollution in urban areas. The next important driver of biodiversity loss is unsustainable natural resource use, or in other words, we can say exploitation, over exploitation of natural resources. The important activities which are responsible for over exploitation is fisheries, mining and commercial coal wood extraction. Coming to the fisheries are the livelihood security or food security of millions of people living in developing countries. This fishery is major driver for biodiversity loss in marine ecosystem. The overexploitation of fishes is jeopardizing the entire ecosystem or water ecosystem. It is not only the loss of fishes, but it is also the loss of food web and food chain in entire ecosystem. According to United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization in 2011 reported that 28.8% of marine fishery are overexploited. They also reported if the current rate of exploitation is not being checked or not being controlled, the commercial fishery cannot survive or will not be survived up to 2050. Many of the world's rivers have been rendered inert due to industrial and agriculture pollution. Having said this, it established that fisheries is a major direct drivers for biodiversity loss, especially in marine ecosystem. The second most important impact or factor which is leading to the overexploitation of natural resources is mining. The impact of mining on natural resources is vary depending upon the method of mining, time, duration and place. The impact, for example, open cast mining is more detrimental to environment than underground mining. The impact of mining is habitat loss and fragmentation, disturbance to wildlife, increased colonization and associated species loss, chemical contamination of surface and groundwater, declining species population. Toxicity impacts to organism, altered landscape and increased erosion and siltation, persistently toxicity to organism, loss of original vegetation and biodiversity. The next important driver of biodiversity change is climate change. We all know climate change is occurring. The projected impact of climate change are continuously or progressively more significant in coming decades. It is affecting all biomes. It is affecting all species, communities, population and biomes. We have observed loss of Arctic sea ice, which in turn threatens biodiversity across entire biome and beyond. The same way, ocean acidification resulting from higher concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is also because of climate change. Climate change and biodiversity are interrelated. In one way, the change of biodiversity or the biodiversity is disrupted because of climate change. On the other hand, biological resources or biodiversity can check the change of climate or the rate of change of climate. So, climate change and biodiversity are interrelated. It is the major impact of climate change on ecosystem. If we see, these are changes in species distribution, changes in population size, changes in the time of reproduction or migration events, increase in the frequency of pest and disease outbreak and coral bleaching. The next important driver of biodiversity change is invasive alien species. Invasive alien species is defined as species that have overcome geographical or reproductive barrier and it threaten ecosystem, habitat or species. There are various factors which are responsible for the introduction of invasive alien species, but underlying cause is international trade. For example, in India, the Parthenium is exported as a wheat because of international trade. The same way, Iconia carapsis is one of the major invasive alien species in Dal Lake, which is detrimental for the biodiversity or biodiversity of the lake. Likewise, Lantana camara, it is creating havoc in the ecosystem by competitive exclusion. So, if we see the various mechanism by which invasive species drive local or native species to the extinction, it can be competitive exclusion, niche displacement, hybridization with relative native species. The next driver or next direct driver of biodiversity loss is increased spread of diseases. We all know that human activities increases the disease transmission and spread of disease carrying vector. Diseases can reduce the size and density of vulnerable population. The example is black-footed ferret Mustela nigrips, which was destroyed by canine distemper virus. In this slide, we will discuss about direct drivers of biodiversity loss for different ecosystems. For example, the forest ecosystem, the major direct driver of biodiversity loss is habitat change coupled with overexploitation, nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. For dryland ecosystem, the major driver is habitat change along with overexploitation, pollution and invasive species. In inland wetland, the major driver is habitat change, pollution and invasive species. In coastal ecosystem, habitat change, pollution and invasive species. And in marine ecosystem, the driver is overexploitation and habitat change. Having said this, the magnitude of the impact of loss of biological diversity can be measured by humanity's ecological footprint. If we see the ecological footprint in 2006, which is the latest year where the reports were published, the ecological footprint of humanities is 40% more than the earth carrying capacity. And in 2002, when 2010 biodiversity targets were observed, it was found that there is 20% more increase in the ecological footprint of humanities. So, with the increase of population, the developmental activities is causing detrimental effect or harmful effect on biodiversity. The human population is expected to reach between 8 to 9 million in the middle of the century. This ever increasing population will demand more food, more space, more fiber, energy, wood and other facilities which are in turn will be obtained from the biodiversity or overexploitation of natural resources. This overexploitation of natural resources is leading to the catastrophic damage to the entire earth, entire biodiversity, entire ecosystem, gene, population, community, etc. So, the major driver, for example, overexploitation of natural resources, habitat degradation, fragmentation, destruction of habitat, pollution, climate change, together with the underlying causes like population, demographic factors, per capita consumption, together with multiple interaction is causing a tremendous loss to the earth biological resources or birth biological diversity, which need to be checked. With this, I will end the session with the proverb that we do not inherit earth from our ancestor, we have just borrowed it from our children. It is a Native American proverb. With this, the major driver of biodiversity loss is being discussed and presented. Thank you.